Your impressions about various treks in Great Himalayan National Park.
There are three valleys that constitute the Great Himalayan National Park, the core of it. These are the valleys of the Jiwanala, the Sindh River and the Tirthan River. The Sindh and the Tirthan are the largest, and they have some of the best treks from the point of view of people who perhaps haven't been in the Himalayas before. If you're really starting out and you want to feel your way a little bit and don't want to get into really rugged terrain, then a very good trek is to go up the Sindh Valley. You'll probably be starting either from Sindh itself or from Newley, which are villages down at a fairly low altitude in the Sindh Valley. And there are a number of trails that follow the valley up on the south bank of the river, going through villages and fields, and also through a lot of very nice forest, mixed broadleaved and spruce and deodar forest. The last village that you come to, which is regularly inhabited, is a regular village, is Lopa. And after that, the valley becomes fairly narrow and rugged, and the track follows the valley up and down all the way. And this is one of the most scenic routes in the park. It's a really delightful trek. You're beside the river at times. At times you have to go above the river where there's narrow gorges. And then you come to an old village called Shakti, which is not really permanently occupied. And beyond that, another village, Maror, very small hamlet right at the head of the valley. If you trek as far as Maror, you're probably going to want to come back to Shakti and then head up onto the higher ground at Dela. Dela is a big meadow, or tarch as is known locally, where grazing was carried out in the summer in the past. And it's a fairly good haul up to Dela. From Shakti there's probably about 1,200 meters of altitude increase, but it can be done in stages, so it doesn't have to be done all in a rush. Once you get up there, you're in open meadows with wonderful views all around. From Dela you can come back to Lopa and retrace your steps down the Sindh Valley. If you want to take a more rugged trek, then another possibility from Dela is to cross over the watershed between the Sindh and Tirthan valleys and come down through Guntarao, which is famous as a place for seeing musk deer, and Shilt Tarch, which is a lower meadow in the forest zone where the western tragophan is very regularly seen. Another thing that you may very likely see on that kind of trek would be Himalayan tar, which are fairly easy to see on the watershed between the Sindh and the Tirthan valleys. At Dela Tarch itself, which you would see on either trek, there's a possibility of seeing brown bears, and there's also a good possibility of seeing Himalayan tar on the cliffs which are beside the meadow area. Throughout the trek you'll be seeing birds and pheasants, almost certainly see lots of Manal pheasants. You'll hear plenty of cocklers, you'll see a few, and a wide variety of bird species will be seen, from the low altitude forest species right up to the subalpine species. So it's a very good bird watching trek. It passes through some of the nicest forest in the park, and certainly if you choose the more rugged route and go over into Tirthan, you pass through some of the best wildlife areas in the park as well. So these are two possible treks. One a more introductory trek, the other a really fairly strenuous trek, which you can take starting from Sindh. If you start from the other side, from Tirthan, you'll start from Goshaini, which is the road head, and then you've got about half a day's walk before you reach the boundary of the park, which is reached at Krongsha. Beyond Krongsha there are no villages at all, and the Tirthan Valley is still at a fairly low altitude, about 1,800 meters. So you are in some of the lowest untouched forest in the area. This is very good area for birds. The track goes along beside the Tirthan River, and if you follow it up, you can go up to Nada Tarch, which is another meadow in the forest zone, which is on the south bank of the Tirthan River. Nada Tarch is a really beautiful place. Again, it's got lovely vistas. It's a wonderful place for Manal, you'll almost certainly see dozens rather than singles. And it's a very good place for seeing birds like lammergeier and golden eagle around the crags. Himalayan tahr also occur in that area. Now, it would be quite sufficient in say a 4 or 5 day trek just to get as far as Nada and then return to Gushani, and that would probably be enough for people who haven't done much high altitude trekking before. But again, if you want a more rugged option, you can go ahead to Tirth, which is more or less the headwater area of the Tirthan, which is an area of alpine meadows where there are a lot of burrell or blue sheep, and Himalayan brown bear is another good possibility to see up there. There is a quite difficult trek which can then be taken along the south bank of the Tirthan that takes you through a number of tarch and brings you back eventually close to Krongsha, where you started out on the first day of the trek. But at any stage you can retrace your steps to where you started. These alternatives gives you options on practically all of the habitats which are available in Great Himalayan National Park. If you choose the more rugged alternatives, and especially if you go to Tirth, then you have the option of getting to really high altitudes above 4,500 meters. That's more of a recreational thing, really. The wildlife largely peters out at that altitude, apart from a few bird species, and of course the burrell, which are fairly high up. You may see pika among the rocks, but by and large you're moving beyond the zone of the typical wildlife by the time you get to those altitudes. And one has to say that bad weather can move in at almost any time of year at those kind of altitudes, and so one really has to watch the weather. But for scenic excitement and beauty, there's no doubt that the high altitudes give some really wonderful experiences.
But there is, as I say, there is a Dhela, Dhela Thajo.